In this short video, I want to take a look at one of the stats apps and show you how it really shows the relationship between degrees of freedom and the shape of the chi-square distribution. So I'm on our Schoology page here, and if you go down to resources, I believe it's let's try that again, resources, the more stats apps. This is where the shiny apps are located here. We've used some of these in other classes, but I'm going to kind of scroll down a little bit and looking for something that's about chi-square here. Let's see, where it is. Here. There we go, chi-square distribution. So if you select the chi-square distribution, see how the shape of the chi-square distribution depends upon the degrees of freedom. All right, so let's kind of see what this app does. So one thing that's nice is I'm going to go ahead and adjust the slider maximum to, say, 15. Okay, so I've now got a scale here. So okay, so what this will do is, as I adjust the degrees of freedom from 1 to 15, notice with 1 degree of freedom, this thing is really, really skew. And also notice that with 1 degree of freedom, the average of the distribution, the expected value, if you will, is 1. And so we'll watch how those things kind of change. So let's say as I go up to 2 degrees of freedom, 3 degrees of freedom, 4 degrees of freedom, 5 degrees of freedom. You see how the curve is changing. It's becoming a little less skew. Let's see if I can get up to 6 degrees of freedom, 7 degrees of freedom. And I'll just kind of start moving a little further now, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So the question is, where is it headed? As we add degrees of freedom, notice that the average is moving. Right here I'm at 14 degrees of freedom. We've got an average of 14. Skewed to the right, but not as severely skewed. Let's go ahead and take it up to 15 degrees of freedom, and we're there. And so what would happen if we kept going? Well, one way to do this is let's go ahead and adjust the slider maximum up to, say, maybe 25. And we'll see if we can now, so we're now going to take this and slide it up to 25 degrees of freedom. So here we were at 15. That's where we were a moment ago. Now let's go ahead and push it up to 25 degrees of freedom. And it seems like the curve is getting more and more normal. In fact, let me go ahead and plant in so there's kind of what the normal distribution looks like that would be centered at 25. And so as I'm going along here, I'm getting more and more of a normal distribution. Just to kind of add to that, let's kind of change this maybe up to, say, 40 degrees of freedom. I'm not quite sure what the limit of this is, but let's go ahead and push it up to 40 degrees of freedom. And we get something that looks like that, and then we'll kind of superimpose the normal distribution that's centered at 40, and see how the chi-square distribution is getting more and more like the normal curve. So as we push up the degrees of freedom, the distribution starts to take on more and more of a normal look. And so that's kind of the important relationship. As you lower the degrees of freedom, you start to get kind of more skew in the sampling distribution. Let me kind of take the normal out of there for a second. So that's kind of the lesson to be learned here. It's kind of a neat applet to play with. There's other options on here. I think if you go up to find probability, you can set the degrees of freedom. Let's say we have 5 degrees of freedom, and if we type in the value of our chi-square statistic, maybe we end up with an 8.5 and say a goodness of fit test. Well, this will kind of show you, well, here at 8.5, this is 5 degrees of freedom. Notice the average is at 5, and then for a chi-square of 8.5, that would have a p-value of about 13.07, or if you want, you could look at the other side of the curve as, so let's see what it says, lower tail, the upper tail, which is, that's usually our p-value. So this will give you a nice way of looking at p-value. I'm not sure what fine percentile and quartile is. Let's see. Maybe, oh, I see. If you wanted to, let's try upper tail. Okay, so if we wanted to set kind of like an alpha value, so if I wanted to set an alpha value, let's say my alpha was 10. So let's take this up to 10. So if I'm looking for what's called the critical value, with 7 degrees of freedom, what does my chi-square need to be to kind of put me in that last 10% of the curve? Well, it would take a chi-squared of a little over 12.017. We often refer to this as kind of the critical value on a chi-square distribution. So again, another nice feature. So I encourage you to take a look at the app. And again, the big takeaway though is how the degrees of freedom, as you increase the degrees of freedom, the curve gets less skew and becomes more normal. Thanks for watching.